Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. With the Emergencies Act moving forward, political reporter Brian Lilly discusses what that will mean for the average Canadian. Both NATO and the United Nations explain how Russia is violating international law even before a potential invasion of Ukraine. And it was a day filled with lots of color and dancing as the International Peace Powwow took place in Lethbridge over the weekend.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said invoking the Emergencies Act was necessary. The motion passed on Monday in the House of Commons by a vote of 185 to 151. Now it's off to the Senate, where political experts say it will more than likely be rubber-stamped. Trudeau says the Emergencies Act helped police deal with the blockades and various trucker protests, including those in Ontario.
Invoking the Emergencies Act has been necessary. Law enforcement agencies relied on it to set up secured areas in downtown Ottawa and at border crossings. It prevented foreign money from continuing to fund illegal blockades, and it's making sure our borders remain open. It has been the responsible thing to do. But even though the blockades are lifted across border openings right now, even though things seem to be resolving very well in Ottawa, this state of emergency is not over.
Political reporter Brian Lilly says many Canadians feel that the Trudeau Liberals implementing the Emergencies Act is an incredible government overreach. Lilly says it sets a dangerous precedent when the act can allow people's bank accounts to be frozen.
The Trudeau Liberals want to go after the bank accounts of individuals involved, not just the organizers, but individuals. And I know that they say that it is not going to be used widely. Doesn't matter. They have given themselves that power. And we know of 206 bank accounts frozen so far. I say that goes well and above the organizers when you get to 206. And we know that it's going to grow. That should be a concern for everybody.
Brian will also discuss which emergency powers the Liberals would like to see become permanent. He'll have details coming up after business news. Police in Ottawa say 107 people have now been charged in connection with the anti-government protests that immobilized much of the city's downtown core for the past 3 weeks. The streets around Parliament Hill are the quietest they've been in weeks, with the Freedom Convoy pulling out, but a heavy police presence remains.
While I know that everyone is pleased to see many of the unlawful protesters are gone, this is not the normal state of our city. Despite the successes of the past few days, we still require these measures to prevent unlawful protesters from returning. After a successful series of operations yesterday, the number of unlawful protesters has dramatically declined in the last 24 hours. City crews are clearing and plowing the affected areas. At this time, checkpoints remain throughout the city. We ask residents to respect these checkpoints and the officers who are working there.
There will be no bail for one of the leading organizers behind the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. Ontario Court Justice Julie Bourgeois says Tamara Litch will remain in custody. Litch was arrested last Thursday and charged with counseling to commit mischief. MLAs headed back to the legislature for the throne speech on Tuesday, and this Thursday we'll hear details about the new budget for Alberta. Finance Minister Travis Taves said this budget has themes consistent and similar with the 2021 budget. Taves said the budget will position our province's economy for growth and diversification. He also said there will be a focus on healthcare and overall healthcare capacity. Many economists believe with oil reaching highs of over $90 US per barrel, it should position Alberta well throughout 2022, bringing the deficit more under control and paying down more of the debt. We will know on Saturday if Alberta will move forward with a second phase of its pandemic reopening plan. Premier Jason Kenney says that is the day he will announce a decision. Kenney says the decision will be based on the latest data. The Premier ditched Alberta's vaccine passport earlier this month, along with mask requirements for kids in schools and for children 12 and under in all settings. Now, the next step, planned for March 1st, would see all mask mandates lifted, along with gathering limits and work-from-home rules. It was a very chilly start to the work week today, with the temperature hovering around minus 20 degrees for many parts of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is here now with an early look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though a warming trend may be on the way, and with it, the potential of more snow?
Yes, like you said, we did have a really frigid start to the week, but that mercury will be climbing. Yes, indeed. As we look to Wednesday, already we're seeing it warm up a little bit, -9 as opposed to those -20s. From there on out, it will get even warmer, looking at the plus temperatures by the end of the week. And yes, we could see a bit of flurries coming as well. I will have more details about all of that later on in the newscast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. With these chilly temperatures, the risk of frostbite and hypothermia increases. Southern Alberta is currently under a frostbite warning, and frostbite can happen within less than 30 minutes. Dr. Alison Gonzalez with Alberta Health Services says the best way to avoid getting frostbite would be to double up on layers, especially when those temperatures start to dip below -27.
It's important to wear a hat that covers your earlobes and to wear a scarf that covers your mouth and nose, because it's really your extremities that are really kind of firstly impacted by frostbite. So the ears, the nose, the cheeks, the chin. So those would be my best tips for that part of your body. And then in addition to that, you're wearing mittens over gloves and wearing a pair of really nice woolen socks or thin-sole socks would be your best bet.
Gonsalves says when it comes to hypothermia, it's best to wear a thick jacket with a sweater to maintain your body heat. Well, the Coldest Night of the Year event will be coming up this weekend. So far, the fundraiser by Streets Alive Mission has raised close to $50,000 with a $70,000 goal. Jennifer Lepko, the Director of Fund Development for Streets Alive, says there are a number of items the organization will be able to purchase to help out our city's most vulnerable.
So we raise these dollars because we want to be able to provide people a warm place to be, a place to just even warm up, a warm cup of coffee, warm socks, boots, coats, a snack to keep, their belly warm. Those types of things. We, in our last cold snap, we had a number of days where we had volunteers bringing in big vats of soup. So things like that, nice warm soup, but just meet those basic needs. And that's where these dollars go to.
Lepko says Streets Alive spends up to $75,000 a month if they had to purchase everything for people to come out of the cold. There are currently 175 walkers and 32 teams registered for the charity walk. The City of Lethbridge is receiving $4.9 million from Ottawa as an alpha site for a technology pilot. The new initiative will see Help Seeker Technologies create a one-stop shop for those who are looking for social supports and for those offering similar services. Officials say this is the first of its kind platform designed to help transform the social safety net to deliver improved and equitable social outcomes. The platform will be co-developed and implemented in the Lethbridge community. The 2022 International Peace Powwow and Festival took place this past weekend. Indigenous dancers gathered at the NMAC Centre in Lethbridge to promote healing for First Nations in Southern Alberta and compete for prize money during the competitions. As Micah Quinn explains now, an honor guard led out a delegation to mark the very special event.
Over 300 Indigenous dancers made their way to Lethbridge from across Canada and the United States for the 2022 International Peace Powwow and Festival. There was a wide assortment of categories that dancers of various ages competed in.
Tiny tots right up into golden age. You have your traditional dancers, you have your grass dancers, you have your fancy dancers, you have your jingle dress dancers. And it's just a collaboration of all these artistic people and the drummers that are collaborating just on the go.
Sophie White wears a jingle dress and performed a special contemporary jingle dance. The story behind the dress is one of healing.
The jingles that we wear, that's these here, they're made out of tobacco lids. So they had to find something that represented the sound of the rain. And so when the lady had danced in that dress, that was a healing dance, she was sick. And then when she danced in that dress, she had become well. So wearing this dress, like if somebody came up to me and said, "Can you do some prayers for me?" And so when I do that dance, then I could pray over that person and their families and, just anybody out there. Keep us safe, keep us healthy, keep us strong.
Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin received his very own Blackfoot name at the Peace Powwow. Higgin said it was humbling to accept such an honor.
It's been something I know my mom and I have come to this event for years and years. And so it means kind person, and it's Iginapidapi. his pronunciation, and so it's quite a privilege and an honor to receive a name like this.
Capacity was limited at 50%, and the restrictions exemption program was dropped along with QR codes. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Tuesday was Canada Agriculture Day. It's a time when Canadians celebrate not only where most of our food comes from, but also the people who grow and produce what we eat. Bernie Cook with Lethbridge College explains the importance of our agriculture industry.
I think one of the real interesting things about agriculture is that as we're encouraged to eat local, buy local, that sort of thing, agriculture really has a lot more ability to do that than most of the things that we purchase. When you look at what's in your cart, when you purchase whatever, groceries really is one of those that we do support local. I mean, obviously pineapple, that kind of stuff we're not growing here, but the majority of our products we do produce and process locally. And so that's one thing that agriculture can really, really be proud of.
There are many ways you can celebrate Ag Day, whether it's buying locally or by visiting local producers. Well, it's that time of year when people like to flock to the mountains and hit the slopes, but it's best to keep in mind that there is a risk of avalanches. With the drastic changes in weather we've been experiencing, the chances of an avalanche are a little bit higher. An official with Avalanche Canada has some tips if you're caught in an avalanche.
You need to have the dedicated tools to go out there and conduct an avalanche rescue. So you need a shovel, a dedicated snow shovel, a probe, and an avalanche transceiver. It's got to be a modern 3-antenna avalanche transceiver. And then if you're involved in an avalanche or someone in your group is involved in an avalanche, you got to get to them quick. You've got 10, kind of 15 minutes max to get to them. So you're not going to be calling out for first aid. You're not going to be calling for a helicopter rescue. You are the rescuer. You need to go out there and find your friends underneath the snow.
Now, if you're planning on heading out, Avalanche Canada say it's best to check the forecast of the mountain ahead of time. A lawyer for PPC leader Maxime Bernier told a Manitoba court that his client will plead not guilty to charges of violating COVID-19 restrictions. Alex Steigerwald also told court that he and a Crown attorney are working on trial dates. Bernier was arrested last June and charged with exceeding public gathering limits and violating Manitoba's requirement to self-isolate upon entering the province. He was at the start of a tour in Manitoba and was pulled over following rallies in rural communities located just south of Winnipeg. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says Russia is taking military action against Ukraine, and there is every indication it continues to plan for a full-scale attack. Stoltenberg is condemning Moscow's decision to recognize separatist areas of southeastern Ukraine as independent, calling the move a flagrant violation of international law. He says NATO allies have warplanes on high alert and warships ready at sea. The United Nations Secretary General said Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to recognize certain areas of eastern Ukraine as independent is a direct violation of the sovereignty of Ukraine.
The Secretary General is greatly concerned by the decision by the Russian Federation related to the status of certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine. He calls for the peaceful settlement of the conflict in eastern Ukraine in accordance with the Minsk Agreement, as endorsed by the Security Council in 2015. The Secretary General considers the decision of the Russian Federation to be a violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and inconsistent with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. The United Nations, in line with the relevant General Assembly resolutions, remains fully supportive of the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders.
Samaritan's Purse volunteers are hard at work in Memphis, Tennessee, after a winter storm brought record snowfall and damaging freezing rain. At least 3 people died due to the severe weather. The storm also knocked out power to more than 270,000 homes.
We heard it was coming. It did come, and I wasn't expecting it myself personally to be this bad.
In the ice storm, my pine tree started shedding its branches and lost almost all of the branches on the tree. And so each little fluff of pine needles was like a cluster of icicles. And the limbs just started crashing.
The ice came, the rain, and all of a sudden we heard branches breaking off, snapping like a firecracker.
It was scary. I was afraid they were going to hit the house, and it's just made a big mess.
Thank God no one got hurt. The house wasn't damaged. But I'm just thankful that my grandbabies were here with me. They're safe, I'm safe.
I feel blessed that Samaritan's Purse has come here to help everyone in Memphis, but especially me.
Show her and give her direction, wisdom.
I think more people need to pray and put blessings on all those people that are willing to come and volunteer and help you.
And for great people like you all to come out and volunteer to help clean this up is amazing. And they act like they love what they're doing. I'm a believer of Jesus myself, and I really appreciate the kindness that you all have showed me today.
Well, a cold front really made its presence felt here in Lethbridge as we hovered around minus 20 degrees for a lot of the day. But fortunately, the mercury will be climbing. Complete weather details are coming up. Old Man Winter had a solid grip on our region today as we stayed around the minus 20 degree mark. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at our weather forecast. Jeanette, with the wind chill, however, it felt more like minus 30, but fortunately, the mercury will be climbing.
Well, yes, we will be warming up a bit, but not before tonight. Look at that overnight low, minus 28. With the wind chill, it is going to feel more like minus 37. With that said, by tomorrow morning, we're going to be waking up to what feels like minus 38 with that wind chill as well. Risk of frostbite. However, into Wednesday, we are going to see that warming trend begin to happen. Minus 9 is the high for tomorrow. Going to see some gusty winds tomorrow as well, 30 to 50 kilometer per hour winds. As we get into Thursday, there's that 60% chance of flurries that we were talking about earlier, minus 4 the high. And then we're going to get to the pluses. Look at Friday, +2, sunshine, sunny skies on Saturday. 5 degrees, going to be a lovely 9 degrees on Sunday, and then all the way up to double digits on Monday, 11 degrees the high. It's crazy. Southern Alberta, we're going from minus 18 to plus 11 within a week. So the average high for this time of year, 3 degrees. Minus 10 is the average low, like they say. If you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes, right? 17 was our high back in 1973, and in 1957 we had our lowest on record, which was minus 34. 7:28 is when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set today. 6:01 p.m., giving us almost 10 and a half whole hours of daylight. As we look to the nation's highs for Wednesday, Victoria, sunshine, 3 degrees, 1 degree in Vancouver. Should see increasing clouds in both of those cities by the afternoon. Edmonton tomorrow, partly cloudy skies, minus 11 the high. Same thing for Calgary. Calgary's winds only sitting at about 15 kilometers per hour. Wind chill also in both of those cities. Should feel a little bit colder than that minus 11. Now there's an extreme cold warning in effect for the prairies here. A massive Arctic mass is going to be sitting over this region for the next couple of days. These minus 20 temperatures going to be feeling more like in the minus 30s and minus 40s. So keep that in mind. Risk of frostbite in minutes as well. Toronto seeing a chance of flurries tomorrow, minus 2 the high. We're seeing a risk of freezing drizzle with the flurries in Ottawa. Actually, both Ottawa and Toronto tomorrow. Minus 5 the high in Ottawa, 1 degree the high in Montreal tomorrow. Could see rain turn into flurries there. Now in Fredericton tomorrow, 15 the high, chance of rain. Rain also in Halifax, 9 degrees the high. Rain throughout this whole region here, really. Charlottetown's high tomorrow, 10 degrees, and 7 the high in St. John's, Newfoundland. Also keep in mind 80 kilometer per hour winds in many of these cities as well. So there you have it. That is your weather forecast.
U.S. President Joe Biden has announced heavy sanctions against Russian banks and oil producers over their actions in Ukraine. Biden says he's also moving additional U.S. troops to the Baltic states on NATO's eastern flank. He says Moscow has violated international law by invading parts of Ukraine. The European Union earlier agreed on sanctions targeting Russian officials involved in approving the deployment of Russian troops to separatist-held regions of eastern Ukraine. Frito-Lay Canada has halted shipments to Loblaw in a dispute over price increases to offset the impact of inflation. A Frito-Lay spokesperson says it is making price adjustments to offset rising costs for ingredients, packaging, and transportation. Loblaw, meanwhile, says it is focused on minimizing retail price increases and on ensuring that higher prices requested by suppliers are appropriate. Some industry experts say that grocery retailers are trying to stop suppliers from using inflation to justify unreasonable price hikes. Others suggest grocers are using their market strength to bully suppliers and pad their bottom lines. Home Depot's shares slumped today, even though it reported its sales remained strong in its fourth quarter. The home improvement retailer says it continues to benefit from a hot housing market as sales rose close to $36 billion US. That is up from just over $32 billion last year. But its shares were down 8.6% as concerns over its profit margins outweighed the otherwise solid quarterly financial report. Investors watching bank earnings will be keeping an eye on any hints at how the institutions expect to fare with the next two big trends this year, interest rate hikes and inflation. The central banks of Canada and the United States are expected to start raising interest rates next month. Analysts will be watching for any outlook changes from Canadian banks on how they expect the higher rates will play out. They say expenses will be another key trend to watch as wages and other costs rise in the competitive growth environment. Royal Bank kicks off earnings Thursday, followed on Friday by CIBC and National Bank. BMO and Scotiabank will report on March 1st and TD Bank on March the 3rd. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The markets are still reacting to the potential Russian invasion of Ukraine. The TSX was down 100 points on the day to 20,907. The Dow was down 482 points to 33,596. The S&P 500 was down 44 points to 4304, and the Nasdaq was down 166 on the day to 13,381. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.70 to $91.91 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to $4.50 US. Gold was up a cent to $18.9865 US an ounce, and silver was down a cent to $24.11 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.38 per bushel, barley's at $9.47, canola's at $23.35, and corn is at $10.87 per bushel. Live cattle were up 15 cents to $145.40, feeder cattle were down $1.20 to $164.23, and lean hogs were up $2.68 to $112.08. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $78.32 US. Recapping one of our top stories, police in Ottawa say 107 people have now been charged in connection with the anti-government protests that immobilized much of the city's downtown core the past 3 weeks. The streets around Parliament Hill are the quietest they've been in a few weeks, with the Freedom Convoy pulling out, but a heavy police presence still remains. The Emergencies Act, invoked by the Trudeau Liberals, passed on Monday. Now, what does that mean for the average Canadian? Political reporter Brian Lilley will have the answer to that question in just a moment. As we reported on Bridge City News, the Emergencies Act passed on Monday. Now, what does that mean for Canada and for Canadians? To talk about this in a little more detail is political reporter Brian Lilley, joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, Conservative MPs and even Alberta Premier Jason Kenney say the Emergencies Act is not necessary, considering that the borders are no longer closed. Most of the Freedom Convoys left our nation's capital. So why still move forward with it?
Well, the Trudeau Liberals, I don't think had a valid reason for bringing it in. I thought that the way the law is written, they could bring it in, but I didn't think they should. I didn't think that it was needed at all. And we saw with the way the protest was cleared out by police in Ottawa that they just used existing laws, standard police procedures. You know, there was no special magic sauce that the Emergencies Act gave them. The Windsor border crossing for the Ambassador Bridge, which the Trudeau Liberals kept bringing up in the House of Commons to defend using the Emergencies Act. Well, I mean, my goodness, that was cleared and open the day before they invoked the Emergencies Act. So they didn't really need it. They cited the ability to commandeer tow trucks and force them to tow rigs out of the way. Well, you know, once the road was clear, tow truck operators were willing to do it. Plus, they could have used either tow trucks that the military has at CFB Petawawa, just a short drive from Ottawa. They could have used the ones that Ottawa's municipal transit system, OC Transpo, has. They didn't do that. The Emergencies Act is supposed to be there for when you have no other choice. And I think they had lots of other choices They just decided not to go that route because the Emergencies Act seems dramatic. It makes it look like the federal government is doing something, and Justin Trudeau gets to go in and be the hero firefighter putting out the flames that he was fanning just days before.
Some people think this is just simply a power grab by the Trudeau Liberals. Interim Conservative leader Candace Bergen tabled a motion to revoke the powers immediately after the vote was over, Brian. Why would you do that so soon after losing the vote?
Well, it would seem odd if, you're not familiar with the act, and very few of us are, but I've spent a lot of time reading it lately. By invoking what's called Section 59, so last night on Monday, they voted on Section 58. Section 58 is them giving credence to the government. They say, yes, you have shown us why you need this act, and we vote to continue the act. Section 59 says that any 10 senators or 20 members of the House of Commons can sign a letter calling for a vote to rescind. The House of Commons was not supposed to be sitting yesterday. It was a special sitting. They come back next Monday. By tabling that motion immediately, what Candace Bergen has done has put this coming vote on the order paper for next week. So as of next Monday, they have to start having 10 hours of debate and then a vote on whether or not to keep these measures in place. The vote on Monday night extended them for 30 days from when they were invoked. So it was invoked February 14th. So about March 16th is when they would expire, unless the government withdraws and says we no longer need them, or they have a vote. If Trudeau wants to keep them until March 30th, he's going to have to go through another vote now, forced by Candace Bergen and the Conservatives. So I think it was a very smart move. I don't think they needed to bring in the act. I don't think they needed to extend the powers on Monday. They will have a very hard time explaining why they need the Emergencies Act when a vote happens again next week, probably around March 2nd.
Yeah, the motion was passed in the House of Commons, but it still has to be voted on by the Senate. Will it just simply be rubber stamped?
I really don't see the Senate doing anything other than what the government wants it to do. One, it would be odd on such an important measure for the appointed body to overturn the will of the elected body. So like what the elected body did or not, that is the will of the elected body of Parliament. To have the appointed body turn around and say, no, you can't have that, that would be, it would be the wrong thing for them to do. Beyond that, the so-called independent Senate group votes more often with the Trudeau Liberals than the old Liberal caucus did when they still had Liberals or senators in the Liberal caucus. So there's no way that this supposedly independent body is going to do anything other than rubber stamp the Prime Minister's wishes.
So Brian, let me ask you something. A lot of us here in the West are concerned of government overreach. What will the Emergencies Act really mean for Canadians?
Well, if you own a tow truck company in Ottawa, it means they're going to try and force you to tow trucks. Oh, wait, they're gone already. The trucks are gone. Look, there definitely is overreach in this. And, the government keeps saying no civil liberties have been suspended or infringed. That's not true. Some media outlets have said that all civil liberties have been suspended in Canada. That's not accurate either. But, in the short term, they have brought in measures to say you can't go certain places. You could not. On the day that Parliament was voting on the Emergencies Act, you were not allowed to go down there and protest that. Not as part of the convoy, not to reconstitute the Freedom Convoy. You showed up yourself with a placard. And how many times did you see that working on Parliament Hill, Hal? One lonely person with a placard outside of the Commons. That was not allowed. So that is an infringement of charter rights. But the big thing and the very scary thing is the weaponization of the banking system in terms of saying, we need this act so that we can go after your money. Look, the first government to freeze the assets of the convoy was the Ford government in Ontario. They invoked Section 490.8 of the Criminal Code of Canada, which froze the money. It didn't seize it, but it did freeze it until a proper court hearing could be held. They could have done that, but the Trudeau Liberals want to go after the bank accounts of individuals involved, not just the organizers, but individuals. And I know that they say that it is not going to be used widely. Doesn't matter. They have given themselves that power. And we know of 206 bank accounts frozen so far. I say that goes well and above the organizers when you get to 206. And we know that it's going to grow. That should be a concern for everybody, because you might agree with it right now, but you love Justin Trudeau and you hated the convoy. Well, what about the next time when there's a conservative government and it's an Indigenous and environmental groups protesting a pipeline? Will you support them in using that? Because this is now become normalized in terms of going after the bank accounts of individual protesters. That's wrong, Hal.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says she wants to make some of these emergency powers permanent. Now, which power specifically are we talking about here? And it sounds like we might be headed down a very dangerous path, Brian.
Well, I'm going to be watching to see if they do head down a dangerous path. I'm, always a big fan of Reagan's old line of trust but verify from the Cold War era. And what they have said so far in terms of what they want to make permanent is actually understandable. And that is adding crowdfunding and cryptocurrencies into the FinTrack system. Now, FinTrack is the system that watches for organized crime moving money around, or terrorist groups moving large sums of money around. It's been in place for over 20 years now, or about that long, and it makes sense. You don't want people being able to move large sums of money without setting off a tripwire where you're suddenly sending $100,000 somewhere. Do you have a reason for doing that? Okay, yeah, Hal always sends $100,000 to his son every Friday because Hal has $100,000 every Friday. If you're doing that all the time, no big deal. It's part of a normal pattern. But when they see unusual activity, FinTrack is there to monitor it and alert police and let them look into it. The fact that cryptocurrency wasn't yet in the FinTrack system is actually shocking to me. And the fact that crowdfunding sites were not part of that system is also shocking. These are two loopholes that organized crime and terrorist groups could have been using for the last several years, and we wouldn't know. And I believe both have been used for money laundering operations in which Canada is awash in money laundering. We need to get on top of that. If that's all they do, then I'm fine with that. My worry is they'll go further. They'll try to extend things that they shouldn't.
Brian, one of the organizers of the Freedom Convoy, Tamara Lich, was denied bail and will be back in court on March the 2nd. But why was she denied bail?
It was a strange reasoning that I read from the judge. If the judge had come out and said, well, we're denying you bail because we think you're a flight risk, I think that would have been completely understandable. Just because of what Ms. Lich has said, the fact that her husband said he got to Ottawa on a private plane, but wouldn't tell anybody how whose plane or who paid for it or things like that. That if you're worried about someone fleeing town and they have access to a private plane from an unnamed person, as a judge, you might be worried that they'll flee town, they'll flee the country. But the judge in this case didn't use the flight risk, at least as far as the reporting I saw. It was all about the fear that she would reoffend. Hal, I live in a city that has a gang and gun problem where people that shoot up the streets are given bail the next day. I have covered protests like the Summit of the Americas in Quebec City years ago, the G20 here in Toronto about a decade ago, where violent acts, in Quebec City, it was a pitched battle for 2-3 days. In the G20 here in Toronto, I think it was a Friday, there were large parts of the city that were no-go zones for anybody that was worried about their safety as protesters marauded, burnt, set up bonfires in the middle of busy intersections, trashed cop cars, trashed businesses. And in that case, one of the main organizers was granted bail the next day. So I'm not sure why Ms. Lich was denied bail on the worry of reoffending. As I said, if it was a flight risk, given the way her husband wouldn't answer questions, he wanted to be her surety, but wouldn't answer basic questions about him flying to Ottawa on somebody's private plane, that's understandable. I don't get the judge's reasoning in this case, though.
Last week, there was an attack on the Coastal GasLink pipeline project in northern BC. Now, so far, no major moves by Ottawa. They're leaving things up to the police. Now, don't the same arguments used for the Emergencies Act apply here as well?
100% they apply. The government has said that they needed the Emergencies Act to because of the economic harm being caused to the Canadian economy, that trade was being disrupted, that critical infrastructure was at risk, that they claimed violence that, quite frankly, wasn't there, not on the scale of what they were talking about. Yeah, people were harassed in the streets. Yes, there were isolated incidents, but it wasn't the mass protest doing this. In this case, we're talking about activists who went into a work camp, caused millions of dollars in damage. This was a politically motivated attack. They set things on fire. They destroyed pieces of heavy equipment. They booby-trapped the road to stop the police from being, and other first responders from being able to access it. How you don't turn around and say all the same arguments apply is beyond me. And that's one of the reasons that I didn't think the power should be extended. It's one of the reasons I don't think the Emergency Act should have been used in this way. See, what people have to remember, whether we're talking Provincial Emergencies Act or federal, you can invoke the act, and that's fine. And here in Ontario, they invoke the Emergencies Act. But what's important are the orders that flow from them. And the Ontario orders were all about clearing roads and bridges. 4 pages detailing how and why that should be done. That is pretty normal. Governments of all stripes want the roads and bridges clear. In the federal case, the orders talk about the banking information, restricting freedoms. That's the scary part. And if it applied in the case of the Freedom Convoy, it surely must apply in this case in Houston, BC, but they're not doing it. And with that, they're showing how political they're willing to be, politicizing the Emergencies Act and the use of force by police and the use of the banking system by the government.
The federal Conservatives have not yet moved forward with the rules for their leadership campaign, but there is talk of another candidate joining Pierre Poilievre. Former Quebec Premier Jean Charest is thinking about running. Tell me more.
Well, this comes from Joël Denis Bellavance, great reporter with La Presse, former colleague on the Hill, who says Charest has gone beyond just taking calls or hearing from people that are interested. He's actively looking at it. Now, the rules are important. You set up, the rules haven't been set. Once the rules are set, that will tell people whether they want to enter or not, because the feeling right now is Pierre Poilievre has the upper hand. He announced early. He's got a lot of support from MPs in the Conservative caucus. If the rules come out and they say, well, it's going to be a 2-month leadership campaign and you got to have all your memberships in within a month, well, then don't expect to see a lot of people enter because they won't have the ability to organize. If it's a longer campaign, then yeah, Charest most likely going to be in. You could see others deciding to jump. I know that Patrick Brown, the former Ontario PC leader, currently mayor of Brampton and a one-time federal MP, he's looking at running, but it depends on the rules. Will he have time to be able to sell memberships and organize? Will people from different factions be able to court support? If it's a longer campaign, expect more candidates. If it's a shorter campaign, it favors Pierre Poilievre. But Jean Charest, definitely looking at doing it. For people that say, well, he was a liberal in Quebec. When Jean Charest was leader of the Progressive Conservative Party federally in the late 90s, he was asked to go and join or to run to be Premier of Quebec. At that point, there was no Quebec Conservative Party. There were 2 parties. One was Federalist, that was the Liberals. The other was the Parti Québécois, they were the Separatists. It was a weird amalgamation of people that you would find in this party. Everyone from New Democrats like Tom Mulcair to conservatives like Jean Charest, all running under the Liberal banner because that was the only party running to keep Quebec in Confederation. He did run a pretty left-wing government, but that's Quebec. He is more conservative than people will give him credit for. And I know that from years of covering him, both when he was premier and when he was opposition leader in Quebec.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
The Canadian economy continues to have its share of challenges with the ongoing uncertainties related to COVID. But it seems that overall, the residential real estate market has remained quite strong. Joining us now to talk a little real estate is Jeff Reimer. He's been a Lethbridge realtor for over 25 years with Royal LePage. Jeff, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hey, nice to meet with you, Hal.
So Jeff, where are we at in southern Alberta when it comes to the real estate market right now? Is it more of a seller's or a buyer's market?
Yeah, I would lean towards sellers right now. The inventory is lower than historically, which supply and demand just, leans it towards sellers. But it's not crazy, but it certainly would lean toward the sellers right now.
So how many listings would you say we actually have in Lethbridge right now? Let's say between 250 and maybe 350,000, approximately. Where are we at?
I know the inventory's down though. We're looking at citywide. The inventory's down probably to just under 3 months of supply. That I do know for a stat.
How about the average home price right now in Lethbridge? Where are we at?
Yeah, that's risen. From 2020, it was close to about 300,000 for Lethbridge. And now that includes different genres of homes, not just single detached. And this year it ended up closer to 320-ish.
Wow, that's incredible. So what do you think is selling the fastest right now? Would it be the townhomes, the condos perhaps, not only for the first-time home buyers, but maybe also those who are thinking of downsizing?
Yeah, condos started the pandemic, just about 2 years ago as being hit maybe the hardest of types of homes because people were nervous about living in close quarters with others. And this year we've seen a good resurgence in the condominium and townhouse market. A little bit of getting back to school has also helped with the condominium and townhouse market. So the single family, though, had remained strong over the last 2 years, very strong.
Now, the older I get, the more I have a challenge when it comes to stairs. I know some of our viewers can relate to this as well. Would you say it's safe to say that maybe bungalows are becoming more popular as opposed to 2 stories, instead of having those 18 steps up and 17 steps down?
Yeah, yes and no. Certainly, yes, Lethbridge has an older population. It's kind of a retirement area for Southern Alberta because it's, closer to the border. It's warmer here than in Calgary, Edmonton, for sure. So yeah, bungalows do stay strong in that respect. But with the land prices going up and developers tending to make smaller lots, the general trend is more 2 stories actually. So it's kind of a weird trend because of the cost of land, right? And you see it in bigger centers even more, but Lethbridge, you still have a lot more choice. But yeah, the 2 stories are still doing quite well.
Have you noticed over the years as well, because you've been a realtor for close to 30 years now, like you said, the lot prices have gone through the roof. I remember when I was a kid growing up in a bi-level or a bungalow, we had a huge lot. It would take us maybe an hour and a half to mow the lawn. But now with some of these 2 stories that they're building, they're like on postage stamp lots. You can almost reach out of your bedroom window and touch your neighbor's house.
Yeah, it's certainly changed, right? And busier lifestyles, it's weird, but I believe lifestyles are more busier now than they used to be. Less gardening, more people doing the grocery store than doing gardens. I mean, is a factor of that doing in the lot sizes, but you can still go to the communities just outside of Lethbridge and get bigger lot sizes, like for Coaldale or Colehurst or Nobleford. Yeah, you can still get good lot sizes though in Southern Alberta, which is nice.
Maybe with some of the grocery prices going through the roof right now, maybe people will consider getting the bigger lots and going back to gardening. Try and save some money that way.
Absolutely. My wife made me clean up the yard. She wants to put some raised flower beds in this year. And I think that's a bit of a trend. You see people doing more of that so they can control what they're eating. They're not concerned about, additives. They can grow their own stuff, have it fresh. And yeah, it's definitely, we're seeing a bit more of that for sure. And it's good, healthy lifestyles. So.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, a vegetable garden is good, and the flowers add a little bit of color, helps pick up our spirits, bring up our spirits a little bit. Now, there's certain areas of Lethbridge, Jeff, that tend to be more popular for buyers than others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it depends where you're at. All areas of Lethbridge have their pros. The west side's developing more just because there's more land available there, and the infrastructure's growing. The north side really did well with the implementation of that new park. They're up by Legacy. That's really helped them. And the south side is always, the commercial hub and close to the airport. And, for folks going south, that's always a prime area. There's just not as many areas to expand in the south. So, the demand is still strong in all 3 areas of Lethbridge.
I've been chatting with the mayor and some other city officials as well about the potential of maybe Walmart going into the west side. I talked to a lot of people who live on the west side, and they're begging for either Walmart or even a Canadian Tire. What have you been hearing?
Well, I don't have any privy information, but I do know that talk of a third bridge, if that could be years and years away. but specifically, I don't have news on that, but it's still a short drive. I live on the west side and I zip across that bridge in a few minutes and I can get downtown in 5 minutes from my house almost. So, Lethbridge is still a really accessible community from all areas. It doesn't take you long. You can get from one end to the other in about half an hour, no problem. And that's a real plus when you're considering communities to move to.
So Jeff, are people still hesitant about viewing homes during the pandemic, or are they pretty used to that now?
More used to it. I mean, it's still a concern, but yeah, the sales would indicate that we've done well of working through that. People are a little bit more at ease, certainly, than they were a year ago. But we still like to take precautions and wear masks and sanitize and be careful. But no, generally it's been good, and we've worked through it, and the sales have reflected that that's been overcome.
How about open houses? Is that still a good way for you to potentially get leads or show people what the house looks like that's on the market?
It is an option. It's less of an option. People are more comfortable viewing initially on their computer and looking at virtual tours, but it still can be a good tool. I mean, nothing's different than going into a house and seeing and smelling and feeling the perspective that you don't quite get from a camera, and then standing out and looking around at the areas and how the rooms reflect and light reflects. And you still need to go into a house to get the true feel of it.
Now, we've seen some record low interest rates. Do you think this trend will continue, or with inflation, are mortgage rates likely to start going up?
Yeah, I'm not an economist, but certainly the rates have been great. That's been part of the stimulation of our market. And Lethbridge is a conservative money town, I think, and so the lower interest rates has helped boost Lethbridge as well. And I think that there's pressure to slow down inflation for sure. So they're saying they're going to raise interest rates, and they were, they moved a few here this week, a little bit up, but I don't think they're going to do too much. When I talk to my banker friends, they're suspecting that they will rise somewhat, but they're still going to be reasonably low. I remember when I bought my first house, I locked in for 7 years. I was stoked I could get it at 7.625. So I locked it in for 7 years, I think it was. And now, I mean, the rates are still incredibly low, and that's going to keep the market, I think, moving fine.
You're right. I remember when I first bought our first home too, it was 80 to 90% of the payment that I would make would go towards the interest. But now it's almost like 50-50. That's what's amazing. Not only are you building equity, but at the same time, you're paying down your house. Now, Jeff, do you think a variable rate mortgage is still a good option in our current market?
Yeah, I think variable rates are still good. When I speak with some of my friends that study this stuff regularly for a living, if you take an example of what a variable rate would be over the last, let's say, 25 years, my friend Rick always says this. He says, and you look and then you take a 5-year rate and you work it backwards, you're still going to generally be ahead going with the variable. The challenge is it's just slightly more risk. But if you're not over leveraged and your debt load isn't too high, I think there's still a good argument for doing the variable. But if you want to lock in right now, it's not bad because they are probably going to inch up. So if you want to make sure your rate's secure and set for 5 years, it's not, but I definitely recommend talk to your mortgage broker, ask their opinion, then consult with your family. Still use the wisdom of friends and family that have gone through, more than just 10 years of life in the business world, and get their opinions on it. Ask family, ask friends, and talk with your mortgage broker before you make that decision, instead of just doing what you think is best.
Jeff, let's talk about how property values increase here in Lethbridge compared to some other markets. Like Toronto can go through the roof, Vancouver, even Calgary a number of years ago. We sold our house for $198. 4 years later, it went up to over $500,000. You really don't see that here in Lethbridge. So would you say it's more of a slow, steady incline, like maybe 2 or 2.5% each year? How do you see it?
Yeah, well, it sure started like that when I started 29 years ago. But some of these old timers would say, oh yeah, just every year add on 2%. And you certainly can't do that anymore. In 2005, 6, and 7, it almost doubled house prices. Then we hit a peak there in Lethbridge around August of 2007, and then they went down a little bit, but we've regained that loss back. So I would say, right now it's the highest prices we've seen in my career in Lethbridge. And, it's a combination of things though. Lethbridge always was a good value for a town. But these big centers like in BC and in Toronto, when they can cash in and sell a townhouse for 7, 8, 900,000 and then move to Lethbridge, buy a big, beautiful house for 4, 500,000, and then put some extra money aside or completely eliminate any debt and have a little nest egg, it's enticing. So we're finding right now, especially that we're seeing more people move from BC and from the East and taking advantage of the reasonable cost of living here and the lower house prices for sure.
But does the Lethbridge wind blow them back to BC?
Yeah, well, it's always a try. Who doesn't want to go to the mountains? But we have mountains in Alberta too, and we're only an hour and a bit from the mountains here in Lethbridge. That's what I love about it. We get the nice fresh air blowing in from BC, but we also get the milder temperatures. I still think it's one of the best places to live in the country.
How well are some of the bedroom communities around our city doing, like maybe Raymond, Coaldale, and Nobleford?
Yeah, they're doing quite well. Very few houses available in Nobleford. Coaldale's a hot little market. It's hard to find too much property there right now. Supply and demand there is keeping that market very strong. And Raymond as well. Raymond had a good year. Maybe in the last couple months calmed a little bit, but very strong over the year, just like Lethbridge. Yeah, maybe even more so in some of those towns.
So Jeff, let's talk a bit about the stress tests and the tougher mortgage requirements. Can you explain how they work?
Yeah, basically they just wanted to keep the debt load down of Canadians. They were concerned about how much debt load they were having compared to what they should be able to handle in their opinion. And, trying to calm the house prices in the larger centers. It really was needed more so in Vancouver and Toronto, for example. We really didn't need that here in Lethbridge. When it implemented, we thought, well, in theory, that could be good, but we just don't need that here in Lethbridge. We're pretty calm and stable here. So yeah, they implemented it there, but we really didn't need it here in Lethbridge, in my opinion, whatsoever.
So Jeff, what advice would you give to a young couple trying to save up for a down payment to buy their first home? What sorts of things do they have to put together financially before they're ready to make an offer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that stress test factors into how they qualify. So they should get their down payment ready, so save up. You have to have a stable job. So before you make any life changes, maybe talk to your mortgage broker or your banker and say, I might be wanting to buy a house in the next year or two before you make a decision to change a job or maybe lease a vehicle, because it's going to affect your debt load. And that stress test we mentioned, basically it takes the current rates and it adds 2% or defaults to 5.25%. And basically it just qualifies you a little bit higher than what you're paying so that if rates go up, you're not right away defaulting and losing your house. So it is a good thing in theory, but for a first-time home buyer, it's important to just go meet with your mortgage broker, get pre-approved, kind of understand that what it is to understand your gross debt service ratio and your total debt service ratio, what the bank's going to want to see for your amount of income, that you're at a stable job for a period of time. They're going to check your credit. So make sure that you maybe do a little research with your banker ahead of time, so that if all of a sudden you say, oh, I didn't make that payment like 2 years ago, that you can get that rectified sooner, get that cleared off your credit. And then you can strategize with your broker as to how the best way to go forward will be.
Jeff, we only have a couple of moments left here, but I want to ask you about empty nesters. Are you seeing more who are downsizing here in southwestern Alberta?
Yeah, I guess that's always a factor when house prices go up. It's easier for them to sell and move into something smaller. I don't know if much more than before, but it's a good part about Lethbridge is we have good options. There's the new big building getting on Scenic that's going to take out some of the supply up, and there's always been a need in Lethbridge for good retirement housing. But as far as seeing more or not, I don't know, a lot more farmers have trended to sell their larger farms or sell their smaller farms into larger farms. And that retirement rural community has moved into Lethbridge and kept the demand strong. And that's an ongoing thing for Lethbridge. We're a nice retirement center for anyone in Alberta.
And plus we have lots of students here as well with the college and the university. Jeff Reimer, a Lethbridge realtor with Royal LePage for close to 30 years. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks. Nice chatting with you, Hal. Have a good day.
You as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.